Hello everyone, my name is Ethan Evangelista, and today I'm here with Daniel, Gabe, Andy, and Brendan, and we are going to be talking about the economic boom of the 1920s. To preface, this was a time of economic prosperity that was even given the nickname called the Roaring Twenties. Alright, so the Roaring Twenties happened following the events of World War I. A few things that contributed to the Roaring Twenties becoming a time of economic success was that America was now owed money. Originally, America was a country full of debt, but because of their contributions in the war, it led to their time of economic prosperity. American goods were also in demand, so more goods were being exported. And what does that mean if you're selling more exports than you're spending to buy imports? It means you're getting more money.
So, you may be wondering, how did the economic boom of the 1920s affect daily lives for the average American? Well, in general terms, it changed a lot. The economic growth was a time of great prosperity between Americans, and during this time period, Americans owned cars, radios, and even telephones. And due to various other factors, such as increased employment and higher paying jobs, many Americans flourished and were living their best lives. And since jobs were paying more, this also allowed working wives to become housewives, while the men brought home the bacon. The economic boom was also a time period in which many of the great inventions that we use on a daily basis were born, such as the vacuum, the washing machine, and the fridge. Overall, the economic boom had a very positive effect on the daily lives of Americans.
How did World War I factories help in mass production? World War I was the first war that was greatly affected by mass production as we know it today, with the outcome of the war greatly influenced by a country's industrial success and how fast they could produce war goods. Thanks to the assembly line created in 1913, just 1 year before World War I, factories were able to pump out huge amounts of tanks, airplanes, and munitions for the war effort as seen in these photos. After the war, however, these war factories still remained in the US with no war to produce for, so they slowly transitioned into producing home goods. This transition of factories concentrated on producing war products to mass producing home merchandise caused a huge surplus of goods to enter the market, which lowered the cost and helped to lead into the economic boom of the 1920s, which followed just 2 years after World War I.
During the economic boom of the 1920s, many great inventions were made that are still important to our everyday lives, including refrigerators, washing machines, the 3-lens traffic light, and many more. One important invention was the public broadcasting radio. During this time, the first commercial broadcast was sent that helped inform people about who won the presidential election before the newspaper was able to do so. It helped people get news even if they couldn't read. Another invention I found interesting was the liquid-fueled rocket. An American inventor named Goddard launched a rocket for 2.5 seconds, reaching a speed of 60 miles per hour, going higher than 41 feet and landing 180 feet away. He was the first man to give dreams of space travel. Arguably, one of the most important inventions was the antibiotic penicillin. It was found accidentally to inhibit the growth of bacteria. In the 20s, it was considered a miracle drug that could cure any disease. Even though it cannot, penicillin is still in use today.
So now we move into stocks, bonds, and credit. First of all, we have to understand what stocks, bonds, and credit actually are. So first of all, stocks. As we know, the stock market allowed consumers to buy shares of companies and sell them later in hopes of selling the share back to the company for more money than they originally bought it for. This was one of the major factors that led to the Great Depression because of the fact that people were just buying way too many shares and the economy couldn't support it. So bonds. So war bonds were bought during World War I so people could support the government and their war effort. And the government promised to pay the bonds back. Basically, bonds collect interest over time, which means that when you do sell them back, hopefully you'll get more money than you actually bought the bond for. And the government definitely did pay back the bonds and more. Finally, credit. It's buy now, pay later. What this means is that you can attain an object like right as you go into the store, and then you have like a weekly payment, I don't know, like $5 every day, or like every week you pay $20 for something like that. This allowed people to just amass objects on a short notice, but they collected a lot of debt as a result of that. So now we move on to how stocks, bonds, and credit create this sense of wealth in the US. By being able to buy so much on credit, Americans felt like they were just very, very wealthy in general, when in fact they were actually just amassing more debt as they tried to buy more objects. So in addition to that, war bonds, as I said before, war bonds were paid back by the government, and they included interest as well, so that people basically got more money than what they originally bought the bond for. This also contributed to the sense of wealth that Americans had, because they were like, oh, wow, we got more money, and that's just more money to spend. And finally, the stock market. This is probably one of the most major factors that led to the Great Depression. It was a huge boon to the American people at first. Investors could quickly become rich by, seeing the patterns, the rise and fall of shares. However, eventually, people just started buying into the stock market too much, and the shares just kind of got really, really expensive over time, to the point where the stock market just crashed. It couldn't support itself. And unfortunately, as we know, that led to the Great Depression. So here we have an advertisement for clothing in the 1920s. These like this were very, very popular because, as we know, in the 1920s, Americans loved to buy all this stuff all at once. They didn't want to wait for their paycheck. They wanted it here. They wanted it now. This is probably the greatest factor that led to this illusion of wealth. People thought they could afford all this stuff at once. They could buy as much as they wanted. As long as they had the stomach for this debt. And, they definitely could take all this debt, but unfortunately, it seems that many people couldn't actually pay that debt back. And this led to the Great Depression as well.